The last few slides of this presentation are going to be around mixed methods research. And mixed methods research, in a nutshell, is when we talk about a combination of quantitative and qualitative methods in a single study. Now, you'll actually hear this. Different people will use this differently, and so you might even hear some people talk about mixed methods as a combination, for example, of two different quantitative or two different qualitative, but for this class we're going to refer to it as a combination of both. So why would you do that? We've talked about how quantitative and qualitative research both contribute to the overall research process, and so mixed methods basically pulls, rather than using each one to answer a different research question, the whole idea is you have one research question and you use that same research question in order to look at it from both a qualitative and a quantitative approach. So you're using the strengths of both. You're also looking at advantages that you might not get from just one or the other. And more often than not in social science research, what you're looking at is basically whether something is appropriate for the population. So again, you want to have the same research question, but you want to use the strengths of both to determine that. And there's not one single way to mix them. So you may have a qualitative component and a qualitative component, and they're both kind of getting at it with the same general level of intensity. You could have a very, very qualitative study in that really qualitative is the main focus. And then there's maybe a tiny quantitative, so maybe like, a phenomenological approach with a tiny survey attached. Or you could have a very heavily quantitative study and then just have a qualitative component. So this might be maybe a focus group to make sure that a scale is being interpreted the proper way when you're doing a survey. And you may even have for example, a quantitative with a little bit of qualitative blended in. So maybe you have a survey with an open-ended question, or vice versa. You could even have a big qualitative study and just something else kind of embedded in there. And so the idea is it's just kind of worked into it. So there's a lot of different ways to mix and match those methods. There's a lot of different opinions about whether they should even be mixed or not. So some people believe it should be just qualitative or just quantitative. Some people believe it really just depends on the research question, and some people are very hardcore about using the combination of both. So there's really no right answer, but it is important to understand that there are very different perspectives on mixed methods research and the use of it. And so it's depending on who you talk to and what researcher you're working with, you may come across these different perspectives. There are lots of different designs, and I'm not going to go through these in too much detail because they're covered fairly well, but it's important to refer back to what we looked at just a second ago with the visuals of how they get implemented. So again, the idea of not just how you may have, for example, quantitative and qualitative being done at the same time, but then the findings are being integrated together. So you may have a focus group and a survey at the same time, and then you look at that data together, versus, for example, where you do a quantitative, you do a survey, and then maybe you do a focus group or an interview to help you flesh out that quantitative. So you see that not only are the elements and the implementation happening in different orders depending on what your priority is, but then the actual interpretation of that, the analysis, also varies here. Interesting to social science research would be transformative design as well, which combines these research approaches in different ways with a very specific social justice focus. And you could even have it in multiple stages and have a series back and forth depending on how your research is evolving, especially if it's long term. So lots of different ways you can go about it. I've given you some examples here, and so the challenge to you is, without looking at your textbook, take the time to go through each of these and see if you can connect it to one of the designs that we just looked at in the previous slides. How these are embedded, the stages in which they're embedded, how they're analyzed. See if you can understand it at this point.